Well, it's been 4 years since Netflix dropped their Fear Street trilogy, and we were first welcomed into the town of Shadyside, and now we finally have our next entry in the franchise. So is it any good? Let's talk about it. Fear Street Prom Queen is the latest movie in Netflix's horror franchise and takes place in 1988 as the popular girls of Shadyside High are fighting for support to be voted as the year's prom queen. But as an unusual nominee emerges in the race, some of the other candidates begin to mysteriously vanish one by one. So I'm someone that was completely taken by surprise by the Fear Street trilogy when it first came out. I thought the idea of 3 slasher films releasing a week apart from each other was definitely a cool concept, but still kind of expected them to be the usual Netflix slop when it came to the actual quality. Well, you can imagine my confusion when we got a well-executed, atmospheric, fun-as-hell trilogy of films instead. So when I sat down to watch this latest entry, I had some decently high expectations given the previous movies, and Prom Queen is able to offer up a fun yet forgettable experience that doesn't quite have the level of polish as what came before it. When it comes to the story they decided to go with this time around, I don't think there's going to be anything in here that you haven't seen done before in other horror movies. Slashers taking place at a high school prom with a bunch of bitchy teenagers isn't exactly reinventing the wheel within the genre, right? And I'm gonna be honest and say that I'm a little bit underwhelmed by what they delivered this time around in that department, because part of what made that Fear Street trilogy so interesting in the first place is that they kind of took generic and run-of-the-mill horror movie setups and flipped them on their head a little bit by linking them all together in a larger overarching plot. They were able to do something tried and true in a fresh way. Obviously, asking for another trilogy of films to be released the same way they were a few years ago is a massively tall order, but since Prom Queen is a standalone entry and doesn't have a larger trilogy to help build things out, I was hoping for something that was going to be a little more creative. The narrative that goes on here is still decently entertaining, and guessing the killer's identity is fun before it becomes obvious, but I wanted something a bit more adventurous. When it comes to the performances, I think everyone in here does a pretty solid job. You're not going to see any Oscar nominations or anything like that, but they all fit the bill for this intentionally campy and cheesy 80s high school slasher film. India Fowler plays our lead character here, and she does a good job as that easy to root for outsider that's up against the clique of popular girls for the title of Prom Queen. But the group of girls that play the other nominees and are making our protagonist's life a living hell definitely understood the assignment, because I pretty much hated them all from the second the movie started. Fina Strazza especially really embodies that spoiled brat mentality as the ringleader of this clique, and since this is a slasher film, you're not rooting for her untimely demise. She's constantly butting heads with our final girl, and it's fun to watch them try to one-up the other. Definitely a lot of cheesy and over-the-top line deliveries in here, but since that's what the tone is asking for, it feels nostalgic more than anything else. Now let's talk about the actual horror elements themselves in here, because the earlier films ended up being a lot more gruesome and nasty than I was expecting them to be. I mean, limbs were being ripped off, heads were getting put through the goddamn bread slicer, really nothing was out of bounds. And again, there are some pretty creative and messy kills this time around in Prom Queen. They're not holding out on you when it comes to mutilated body parts. Obviously, there are an abundance of horrific things that happen in these movies, but there's something about the way they're handled that always comes off as kind of geared toward a more teen audience. These films have a big-time sleepover vibe to them, where they're the type of movies you might watch late at night with some friends when you're probably a couple years too young for it, and this new entry definitely has that aura around it as well. I'm always someone that's championing gateway horror for the younger generation that's not sure if they like it or not yet, and this latest stop in the series is the type of genre material you should be sinking your teeth into if you want to figure that out. Overall, guys, Fear Street Prom Queen is a solid enough entry in the Netflix horror franchise. It doesn't have the same level of world building the earlier films had, and it ends up being fairly predictable, but it's a fun yet forgettable addition to the series. There's plenty of gore, the performances are solid, and it doesn't overstay its welcome, but I hope in the future they'll go back to giving us more interconnected stories like what we saw in the first trilogy of films. At the end of the day, though, you could do worse than taking another quick trip to Shadyside. Fear Street Prom Queen gets a Sully score of 3 stars. So that's my review of the latest Netflix film. What do you think is your favorite movie in the Fear Street franchise? I think I have to go with Part 2, 1978, but let me know in the comments below what you think. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys at the next one.